May not know, the university, Rice University conducted a poll and ranked all the state legislators. And Tony Tinderholt came out #3 in the state.
Yeah.
Now, what's important about that is his predecessor by the same poll was ranked 86th. So thank you, Tony Tinderholt.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about.
That's what you call trading up.
Amen. If I may, let me introduce my longtime friend, Bill Zedler. Bill's been a friend since he ran. Bill has been patient. He has a different style, okay? And he's a very quiet man. But I want you all to know.
Until you fire him up.
He has his moments, but what I want everyone to know, and why I'm particularly proud of Bill, is because of Bill that we got young candidates to come on like Tony and Matt and all of the young bloods that we have now today because of this man.
Mm-hmm.
That has not endeared him to the Speaker of the House.
Too bad.
But he don't care either. So we just want to thank him and tell him from the bottom of our hearts we appreciate your leadership in Tarrant County, and please run again.
Yeah.
Is Shelley going to do an update?
Oh, was I going to do a
You want to do your update?
real
now?
quick, and then he can have the rest of it.
And I will pass my stuff out.
All right, there we go. Could you just hold that?
I'll make this real quick. I'm just here on behalf of Deborah Lerman, who is our state Supreme Court Justice in place 3, and she's asking that each one in this room who are Tarrant County residents, if you would so kindly sign the petition to get her on the ballot, and take one of her pamphlet or her cards with you. She's from Tarrant County, and she needs all of our support because she does have a challenger. So we need to get behind her. Thank you. That's it.
I've known Deborah for a long time. She's a good justice for us. If you can find it, look it up, look at the background. If you think it's a good idea, sign. But she's earned re-election, in my opinion. Okay?
It's a statewide race, Sean.
Yes, right.
With that, I have, in addition to you, let me introduce the tax man for Tarrant County. Would you please stand, Mr. Ron? We go back a long time, too. We were young together. Anyway, with that, let me introduce Representative from Congressman Martin's office.
Mm-hmm. Jody.
And I can never pronounce the last name. Sagasser. Okay. Jody's been a long time friend. We welcome her here. Mr. Zedler?
Yes.
Are you electronically able?
I am. Yeah, I'm passing out something, and what this is, there are 2 bills that are actually going out. The black one is the achievements that we made in this last legislative session, okay? The other one is the 45 goals of the Communist Party as were determined in 1958. And so if you'll just pass those out, and then what I'll do is, let me tell you what we have. Okay. And I point this out because I do want to make it clear that we did get some good things done legislative this last session. And I'll tell you why I believe that was the case. And it was because a number of us said, we're going to support Scott Turner for Speaker.
Amen.
Because basically what happens is, if you go back to 2009, like, for instance, there were two key issues that were before the legislative session that time. One was the photo ID. The other one was the sonogram bill, okay? And what happened was, while there was initially, there was a race between Tom Craddock and it was the 11 people that were saying anybody else but Tom Craddock, 11 Republicans. The deal was there were 74 Democrats, 76 Republicans. All right, now you'd say, well, that ought to be a no-brainer. Well, the deal was there were 9 Craddock Ds that they were going to vote for Tom Craddock. In other words, these were people that when Tom Craddock became Speaker of the House in 2003, they were Craddock Ds that Craddock made either committee chairs or something like that. And in fact, I had one of them say to me this. He said, Bill, Tom Craddock has dispersed power, and he's done it. This was what the Democrats promised to do for years. Tom Craddock delivered. And the way he did that was, first and foremost, was if you were a committee chair, you could not get on the calendars committee. And for those of you who may not know what that is the calendars committee is the committee that is between the floor and a standing committee that hears bills. All right? So you have about 40 standing committees that hear bills, and then a bill, in order to get to the floor, has to be voted out of that committee. And then what happens, it goes into the calendars committee. Well, the deal is there's no vote in the calendars committee. They just kind of, they what they call tag the bill. The more people that tag the bill, the slower it gets through the calendars committee. And what it boils down to is that committee could get out, that bill could get out in 3 days, or it could never get out. Depending on, quite frankly, how many people tag the bill, or how the House leadership feels about the bill. I don't care if nobody tagged the bill. If the House leadership didn't like the bill doesn't get through calendars. Okay?
Wow.
And so, anyhow, that bill, neither one of those two bills, the sonogram bill or the photo ID bill, never made it to the floor. Now, they said, well, it was only 76 to 74. My friends, we had the votes. All the Republicans would have voted for it. And in both cases, there were a couple of Democrats that would have voted for it. So the votes were there. The deal was the House leadership didn't want to antagonize the Democratic, the leadership of the Democratic caucus, because what they said, there were 65 Democrats that got together and they said, look, we have 65 votes that we will give to the 11 Republicans who are anybody but Craddock, and we don't care who it is. Any one of the 11, that's who we'll vote for. So when you got 11 Republicans and 65 Democrats, who do you think's driving the train?
Certainly in Republicans.
Now here's the thing. Once the word got out that these 11 Republicans were all going to stick together and they were going to vote with the Democrats, all of a sudden we had a bunch of Republicans running over there seeing how quickly they could sign up with it. That's commitment to the conservative cause, isn't it? Yeah. And so what happened was, in 2011, Ken Paxton ran for Speaker. Didn't make it, but you know what? Nonetheless, when it got to the floor, there were 17 of us that voted against Joe Strauss for Speaker. We got both those bills through. Okay? 2013, Brian Hughes ran, and so did David Simpson, but both of them really dropped out before there was ever any vote that came to the floor. So we didn't have such a hot session. In 2015, Scott Turner ran. 19 of us did not vote for Joe Strauss. We got some pretty good stuff done. So it's my contention that as long as there's someone willing to get up, take the shots, and we have a vote. Because what happens then is this. The leadership says, you know, we better get some of this stuff done because the guys that voted for Joe Strauss, they're going to have big targets on their back if we have a sloppy session. And so it really improves the chances for a good session. Now, was it as good as it should have been? Absolutely not. And let me give you a few prime examples. This young lady that was murdered out in San Francisco, right? Okay, well,
Sanctuary
why
City.
did that occur? Well, that occurred because of Sanctuary City. Well, two things, really. One is a leaky border, okay? How many times did the guy, was he deported and brought back? Well,
5 times.
How about the immigrant that molested a little girl over here in Parker County? He had been deported 4 times. How about the 2 that illegal aliens who had murdered the Border Patrol agent who was out with a picnic with his family? They tried to rob him and they murdered him. How many were they? They were deported numerous times. Okay? And here's a stat that we got from DPS, Department of Homeland Security with DPS, that basically said from October 2008 until last summer, they had about 330 criminal illegal aliens who had booked in Texas jails. Okay, in other words, so, and let me add one little caveat to that. That means they committed some other crime other than being here illegally. Okay, and I'm not talking about they had parking tickets, they had not speeding tickets or anything else like that. These were Class A and felonies. Class A misdemeanors and felonies that they committed, okay? Including thousands of rapes and thousands of murders. Because when you total it all up, they had committed a total of 630,000 crimes in that period, okay? Now, so this is not, what happened in San Francisco is not unusual. It is what, in fact, at one time, we were tracking it in my office, and there were more people killed by criminal illegal aliens than had been killed in the war in Iraq and Afghanistan put together. And so this is a direct result of having sanctuary cities and a porous borders. Now, we did pour a lot of money into helping to secure the border in Texas, okay? But there was some other stuff that never made it to the floor. One is the sanctuary cities. Houston's a sanctuary city. San Antonio's a sanctuary city. Laredo's a sanctuary city. And so, yeah, I think that's right. I think, or is it?
Dallas?
It may be the county.
The Metroplex.
Or is it the Fort Worth? Okay. Yeah. And so basically what you have there, that means is if they catch someone who they know is here illegally, they do nothing as long as they're not committing some other crime. And the other thing is we know that Barack Obama has released thousands of criminal aliens that in essence then went out and committed more crimes once they were let out. So the deal is that, you know what, that should have been a #1 issue for us. You know why? Because it's big with the Republican base. I bet if you put that on the ballot, should we have sanctuary cities, it'd be overwhelmingly no. And I bet it would run into the 80s or 90s. Let me give you another one. And this is what has, really created a problem, because it is whether we should give in-state tuition to people who are here illegally.
Exactly.
Now, I had a bill, several sessions that said, you know, we would not give in-state tuition, because right now they're giving in-state tuition to people who are here illegally. And now the deal was, they said, well, as long as they've been here 3 years and, you know, something like that, then they ought to be able to get in-state tuition. Here's my take on it. If you're going to a major university, University of Texas, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, anything other, quite frankly, than probably a community college, okay? If you're going to anything else other than that, there's only so many spaces. In other words, and listen, they may have 1,000 people trying to apply, but there's going to be, you know, 900 positions open. And in fact, this is what I asked the leadership. I said, let me ask you this, because, you know, they kind of got huffy with me when I said we ought to eliminate in-state tuition, and thought I was heartless and stuff like that. And I said, well, let me ask you this. What do you say to the U.S. citizen who's here illegally and gets knocked out of going to the University of Texas, Texas A&M, one of
here
these
legally?
major universities, by someone who's here illegally? And then their tuition is funded by the taxpayer. Okay? The other thing is this. You know, I don't care which way you cut it. We have a good percentage of the budget for education in this state. First of all, it goes to educating people who are here illegally. Second thing is, it costs more because a lot of these people we're educating, they can't even write in their native language. They can't even write in their native language, much less in English. And so the time and money required to do that of course, is taken away from either the taxpayer or the kids who are here illegally. And none of that do I consider to be right. In fact, one of my main complaints about a lot of the policies that are trying to be developed is they never ask, how does this affect current U.S. citizens? How does it affect them? You know, because I guarantee you, that's not a high priority with them. It's well, you know, we got these businesses that like it and that kind of stuff. And don't get me wrong. Hey, listen, I can buy the thing we need migrant workers. Absolutely. We give them green cards, let them come. But you know what? We used to do that. They didn't bring their families. They weren't trying to have an anchor baby and that kind of thing. That's the other thing. Now, obviously, from a state perspective, we can't control that. We can't say an anchor baby is not a U.S. citizen. I don't believe, based on the 14th Amendment, that in fact, I know this. When they said, this does not apply to anyone who owes their allegiance to another power other than the United States of America. Okay? Because, you know, like for instance, they would have diplomats and stuff like that. They were born here. The children had children that were born here. They weren't U.S. citizens.
It'd be under the jurisdiction thereof.
Yeah. And so what it boils down to is, that's from a national perspective. But there's lots of things that we could do on a state level that, quite frankly, we should have been able to do with 95 Republicans out of a 150-member House. Okay? And we didn't get done. Let me give you another one that for me was a high priority that we pushed. That basically, with this last Supreme Court decision on gay marriage, basically we had the ability where we were going to put, last time I had said it was in the Secretary of State, it was with the Comptroller's office, that they were going to have that be the determination of who got, it'd be coming out of the Comptroller's office, who got marriage licenses in the state of Texas. That way, you have one person who's responsible instead of all these different county individuals being responsible, one person. And what it boils down to is if they have a sincerely held religious belief, then it would have certainly slowed things down a lot. And I believe that what we need, all we needed really was one state to really draw the line and say, we're not going here. And let me tell you why, and I think it gets to a number of factors. How many of y'all read any of the opinions of the justices on that case?
Oh.
Okay. Here it is right here. This is all four of them, okay? 102 or 3 pages long. And if you haven't done it, I encourage you to read, especially the one by Scalia, because let me tell you, he made, and because here's the thing, and quite frankly, it's also the case with Obamacare, all right? And that's this. The words in the, what these last 2 rulings show, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the words in the Constitution and the words in the law have virtually no meaning with the United States Supreme Court as we have it right now. Yeah. And that makes that body the most dangerous body that we've had. Because it doesn't matter what the Constitution says, doesn't matter what the law says, they're going to do what they want to do, and they'll simply make something up to go along to justify it. And so it is absolutely dangerous. The other thing is this. Let me ask you this. What separates us as a nation from any other nation in the world?
Rule of law.
Rule of law.
Okay, the rule of law. And what is the foundation of our country as far as where do we get our rights from?
God.
That's right. We're endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then if you go with the rest of the Declaration of Independence, what they do to start pointing out some of the ways that the King of England violated those God-given rights. And then what you do is you get to the Constitution and you see the Bill of Rights. And the Bill of Rights is basically responding to those infractions by the King of England. Okay? And so what it boils down to is they are trying in the Bill of Rights, and quite frankly throughout the Constitution, making it clear and addressing some of these wrongs that they considered in the Declaration of Independence. Now, so here's the thing. Our rights come from God. Now, is it God of the great unknown? You know, just he's up there somewhere? No. Make it absolutely clear the God in it, and let me add one other thing. It doesn't matter whether it's Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin, whoever it was, every one of the founding fathers knew it was the God of the Bible. Okay? That's why when you see everybody when they're sworn into office, their hands on the Bible. Okay? And so what it boils down to is this. Make it abundantly clear there's no such thing as a God-given right for one man to marry another man. Okay? In fact, the founding fathers all made it clear that, you know what? And in fact, if you go to the Northwest Ordinance, one of the things they talk about is that Northwest Ordinance is the document that they drew up to have it where if you wanted to become a state, then here's the things that you had to follow. And one of the things they said in there was religion, morality, and knowledge being the basis for a free and happy people. Public schools will always be encouraged. Now let's see. Let's start going back through the decisions made by the Supreme Court that kind of went very, very contrary to that. All right? And of course, it started a long time ago. So what we have is infraction after infraction after infraction, and making it abundantly clear that, in fact, this is a strike at the very foundation of the country, what they're doing. Because, as you said, it was basically we've been a nation of rule of law, but the main thing was our rights came from our Creator. So that's why this was so dangerous. And yet, the one thing we were able to do is we were able to get bill that protected pastors. If you're a pastor, you won't have to marry, homosexuals if you have a sincerely held religious belief. So, thank you. But of course, now we didn't stop anything that was going to go on in Houston. And of course, that's where if you have a man who self-identifies as a woman and he wants to go into a woman's restroom, then in essence, what can happen is they can, in Houston, they were going to have it where they could be levied with I think it was about a $500 fine. The business could be. If you were a business, you own a business, and a man who self-identifies as a woman wants to go in the woman's restroom, and if they did that, and you created a fuss, and it was a fine. Now, here's the thing, because I think this is important, and you can go home and tell all your pastors this, because a number of pastors went to the city council and said, encouraged them to reverse this decision. You know what they were told by the city council? They vote, you don't. They vote, you don't.
Oh, man.
And what we've seen after a number of cases where that while the vast majority of the churches may believe one way, they don't teach that. And the end result is you got people out there who, oh, yeah, it's okay. So, just a second, I'll get you. So, here's the thing. Do you realize, and in fact, this is one of the things that's I've been shocked at, is the number of people that think that it's 25% of the population is homosexual. No, it's 2 to 3%. 2 to 3%. And let me tell you, friends, make no mistake about it. This is not about we need to reach out to people that are involved in that in love and compassion. But here's the thing. Why would you encourage a lifestyle that if you go into the Center for Disease Control, go into the Center for Disease Control, they're 2 to 3% of the population, and one of the things they'll have is MSM, men having sex with men. Okay? And they make up the lion's share of HIV, it's 65%. They're 2% to 3% of the population, 65% of the HIV cases. Okay? They're 70% of the syphilis cases. In other words, you take every type of sexually transmitted disease, they're the lion's share of the sexually transmitted disease. If you stopped having men having sex with men, you'd cut every sexually transmitted disease minimally in half. You know what? If you say you have compassion and love for people, you tell them the truth and make it clear that's a destructive lifestyle. Now, did you want to ask a question?
Our pastor talked about that a little bit, and I Googled it. And Google, of course, you can't always trust the statistics, but it's supposed to be at least 77% of Americans identify as Christians, whether they practice or not.
Right.
It's only around 2% who are Muslims, and it's only around 3 to 5% that are homosexual. And we're being dominated by decadence out of tolerance. Tolerance, but we're not tolerated.
Right. Right. In fact, I can guarantee you this: if you think, we've heard so often that, well, we got to be tolerant. Does that apply to the other side? Now, let me get on a couple other issues here, and because I think these are important. And what time am I supposed to finish?
When you're finished. You got the floor, sir.
Okay, let me give you. Okay.
The floor.
Let me give you a couple other issues that I think that are going to continue to be hot button issues. How many of y'all have just seen where California passed a law that basically said there are no personal exemptions for vaccines? Okay.
Oh, wow.
Now, in other words, in the past, and certainly here in Texas, it's still the case, where if you have a religious objection, if you have a philosophical objection, to having vaccines, then guess what? You can avoid them. Now, here's the thing, and I'll tell you some of the issues that I have with what they're doing as far as forcing people to have all these vaccinations. There are many vaccinations that are for diseases that the vast majority of us will never have a problem with, and I'll give you a couple of prime examples. The hepatitis B vaccine, okay? They give every newborn baby, when they're first 1 day old, they give them a hepatitis B vaccine. Now, for those of you who know, how do you catch hepatitis B? Well, I'll tell you how you catch hepatitis B. You either got to be an IV drug abuser, or you got to be having sex with men, okay? So, unless your baby's going to be one of those two categories. Now here's the third one that, and I'll respond to it, that if the mother is hepatitis B positive, okay? If the mother's hepatitis B positive, then guess what? Then the baby should probably give, or you should give the baby the hepatitis B vaccine. And when I would have these, I call them vaccine Nazis, in my office, and I'd say, well, why should we give everybody a hepatitis B vaccine? And listen, all we do is give the mother a blood test, and you ought to see them. Sometimes we don't have time. Sometimes, and here's the thing: there's a woman that goes through prenatal care that doesn't get a blood test. They get a blood test.
Amen.
And what it boils down to, well, and of course I applied it to my daughter, and he said, well, you don't know what your daughter's been doing. No, I think I know what my daughter's been doing. I can identify an IV drug abuser. So what it boils down to is basically they, they become apoplectic. You don't want to give all the babies a hepatitis B vaccine. The other thing is this: that there's a database in the state of Texas, okay, and it's supposed to be for everybody who, if you want to have your baby's vaccination record held there, or your child, in the database, you can do it, okay? But there's some people who don't want to do it. And so what we had, the state of Texas followed a policy of opt-in. If you want to have it done for your baby, go right ahead, tell the doctor you want it done for your baby, send the information in there, and you're in good shape, okay? Oh, no, we don't want that. And so I said, okay, well, let me ask you this. If the parents come in through your office, why don't you just have them sign a paper? I want or do not want my child's vaccination in the registry. Yes or no? And have them sign the piece of paper. Oh, listen, if we had to do that, it just wouldn't work. Well, you have them sign a piece of paper? I said, wait a minute. I said, I have never gone into a doctor's office so they didn't ask me to sign something. You know, and I said, I just went and had a colonoscopy, and guess what? I signed about 20 or 30 things. Don't tell me that it can't be done. I mean, they've got to do it for all kinds of other things. To say that we can't expect somebody to sign a paper and say yes or no on a vaccine registry. You know why? Because we're not going to get everybody that way. And what it boils down to is this. One of the things, in fact, here's the, I encourage people to watch a couple of documentaries. One is called The Greater Good. The other one is called Trace Amounts. The Greater Good and Trace Amounts. Watch those. Because the main thing I saw, you know, of course we all know that, of course, vaccines don't cause autism. Oh, you got it over there? Yeah, there's only, here's the only thing that, you know, I kept saying, well, you know, it's a funny thing. There's a lot of people whose child seemed to have been progressing, and all of a sudden they go backwards after they had maybe a series of vaccine shots. And then I would ask, let me ask you this. why is it that when you get into the, like for instance, and one of the things they've said is, well, the reason, we don't want to do a comparison between people who've had vaccines versus people who haven't, because that'd be dangerous. People, we just couldn't have that, people that don't get vaccines. Well, let me tell you, friends, there are people in this country right now who do not get vaccines out of religious exemptions, okay? One of the groups is called the Amish. Do you know what the autism rate among the Amish is? Pretty well nil. You know, not 1 in 100. You go back to 1980, it was 1 in 10,000. And then all of a sudden, as we went, and you know what one of the things was? They started increasing the number of vaccines that every child got. I mean, we're giving children vaccines for everything. And what it boils down to is this. To make it where people are forced to have a vaccination, I think is un-American.
Amen.
Because, let me share with you one other thing that I've run into with the Texas Medical Board. And the one thing that's taught me is this. There is nothing more frightening than to have an unelected bureaucrat with the power of the state behind them coming up against you when they got the state's money behind them and you're having to fork your defense out of your own budget. Had a nurse investigator from the Texas Medical Board. She went into an office and she laid down her card, and there were 3 other people with her. And she says, "We're with the Texas Medical Board." And then after she shows the woman, the nurse, her card, she pulls out a subpoena. Now this subpoena is not signed by a judge, it's signed by the executive director of the medical board, Mary Robinson, who is an attorney, but she isn't a judge. And it was a subpoena for 14 patient records. Well, you know, let me tell you, you mentioned the Texas Medical Board, and you're going to frighten the daylights out of most doctors' offices. So the doctor wasn't there. The nurse goes and gets the patient records, brings them out there. All 4 people start looking through the patient records. All right, all 4 people start looking through the patient records. 2 hours later, an attorney for the doctor gets there and he says, "I want to see everybody's ID." Then and then alone do they realize that 2 of the people there are DEA agents. Now here's the thing. At that point, the attorney for the doctor says, "This meeting's over with," takes the patient records, puts them back in the files, and the attorneys for the DEA go to court and try and get those patients' records back. And when the judge says, "What's the purpose of this?" The attorney for the DEA says, "For possible criminal prosecution of the doctor and some of the patients." Now, you know what, I have to tell you, I'm not a constitutional scholar, but I do know that people have a 4th Amendment right. And guess what? You ought to have a right to privacy of your medical records, and that the only way that anybody ought to get to them is with a subpoena signed by a judge. Okay? Now, here's the thing, though. I confront Mary Robinson, who's the executive director, who is an attorney for the medical board. I confronted her during a hearing with the Public Health Committee. She admits they do this 20 to 40 times a year, thought there was no problem with it, that it's a responsibility of the DEA to announce themselves. Now, excuse me, when the nurse investigator says, "We're with the Texas Medical Board," then guess what? If 2 of the people there are DEA agents, that is a lie. She has deceived the nurse. In fact, it's called fraudulent non-disclosure. Okay? Now, here's the other thing. Since that meeting with Mary Robinson, I've also found out there are 2 Texas statutes involved. One says that the medical board shall not give patient records over to law enforcement for prosecution of the doctor unless they redacted the patient's names, which they did not do. Second thing is, it says they shall not give medical records over to the law enforcement if it's to prosecute the patients. Why? They have a 4th Amendment right. But nonetheless, in the disciplinary action of this doctor, they put this stuff up on the website that anybody can gain access to. Now, in this case, they do redact the patient's name. Okay? Unfortunately, they put the place she works for, which is a fairly small business. And guess what she had admitted to the doctor? that she didn't particularly care about being public was that she had been raped. And so here we have on the Texas Medical Board's website access to information that, given enough that anybody who might know of this woman working at this facility, gives their age, that kind of stuff, then in essence, what it boils down to is that it'd be much easier for them to identify that this were the case. As far as I'm concerned, that's inexcusable. And so I've tried communicating with the members of the board. They have some who are doctors and some who are what they call public members. They're non-doctors, but they sit in on these informal settlement conferences. And I've come to realize that my next step has to be simply calling the Travis County DA and saying, look, I think we've had a violation of the law, and what are you going to do about it? And because what we've seen is apparently it's difficult to find what to do with an unelected official. Now, if it's an elected official, we could get to them real easy. But with unelected bureaucrats, it makes it much more difficult. So I think those are things, and here's the other thing. And I believe one of the things you got to understand about Obamacare is that it's not really about health care, it's about control. And one of the things they want to do is go after doctors who are not what they call cookie cutter medicine, okay? In other words, it's almost a deal where okay, for this, if they have these symptoms, then you do this, and you give them this therapy, okay? Don't think outside the box, okay? Because here's the deal. If you're a physician and you think outside the box, they're going to go after you. And I'll give you a couple of prime examples. In this state, if you have Lyme disease, if you've had chronic Lyme disease, in other words, there's two things can happen. If you catch the tick and then basically you start coming up with symptoms, what, I might have Lyme. Go to the doctor, 60 days of antibiotics probably do the trick. But if you didn't realize you'd been bitten, or maybe the symptoms waited a long time or whatever, and so it was months and months and months down the road, because a lot of times the symptoms for Lyme disease can be very vague. And what it boils down to is don't think you can go to a doctor and get more than 60 days treatment of antibiotics, because those are the ones they start going after. Because you must have something else other than Lyme disease if it takes more than 60 days of antibiotics to cure you. And guess what? It's a funny thing. I've had people say, it took me 8 to 10, 12 months to do it. And they would have us believe, well, you know what? That's just psychosomatic. They just thought they were going to feel better. Okay. But the other thing is this. I came out of the healthcare industry, and I can tell you that some of the best doctors I saw were doctors who did not treat the symptoms. They looked beneath the symptoms to try and find what was really causing the problems. And the deal is they are not cookie cutter physicians. And yet, I've had people who said, this person helped me when no one else could. In fact, there's a doctor down in Houston came up with a different type of cancer treatment. His name is Brzezinski. I don't know if anybody ever heard of him. His name is Brzezinski. Suzanne Summers had him in her book. But he's one of these that does outside the box. Well, let me tell you, between the FDA and the Texas Medical Board, that poor man's probably spent hundreds of thousands of dollars simply defending himself from nonsense lawsuits. And let me tell you what they do, and I'll just give you a prime example. Had a doctor who owned a minor emergency room clinic, came to me and he said, listen, they had me go down for an informal settlement conference for violation of false, misleading, deceptive advertising. And I said, okay, where's they at? he showed me the ad, and I looked at the ad, and they'd already fined this guy $1,000. He also had to take some continuing education courses on ethics and stuff like that. And in fact, he'd already actually signed the agreement that he would accept what they did. And the reason why that is that he accepted the $1,000 fine because to appeal it to the State Office of Administrative Hearings, it's about $20,000 to $30,000 in attorney fees. And so a lot of doctors say, listen, it's $500, $1,000 to get them off my back, I'll pay it. And so what it boils down to, though, he kind of nagged on him. He came to me, he showed me the ad, so I called up the general counsel for the medical board, and I said, you know what, I've got this ad in my hand. Get that case for me. She went and got the case, and she brought it out, and I said, okay, you say that this ad is either false, misleading, or deceptive. Please tell me specifically what is either false, misleading, or deceptive about this ad. Her response to me was, well, you know what, we don't always get that specific. And I said, oh really? I said, would you send me that in writing? And she said, whoa, I wouldn't want to do that. And you know, I thought, I'll bet. And that would be like me saying, you know, we caught you committing robbery, just pay $500 fine, and then you can move on down the road. And we're not going to tell you what you stole, when you stole it, who you stole it from, or anything. You just pay the $500 fine. Yeah. And what it boils down to is, again, because what happens is that the next leap is so much more expensive, a lot of doctors just go ahead and fork the money across.
Called a shakedown.
Exactly. And I can't tell you the number of times I've seen something like that occur, but here's what it boils down to. I think there's a fundamental right in this country, and it's called due process.
There used to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And what it boils down to is, in fact, in law, there's some decisions that have said the mere appearance of due process is not due process. Okay? And unfortunately, when you have unelected bureaucrats with the power of the state behind them, they can have their own agenda. And let me tell you, I believe it is dangerous. The other thing is this. Do you know that there's been a significant drop in the number of manufacturers of supplements and stuff like that? As well as the fact that I've had a number of physicians tell me that the cost of medicines, things that long past their, long ago have been generic and stuff like that, has been going up. So dramatically. And so I believe what it boils down to is this. We need to get engaged with what's going on with our country. And we've got to draw a line in the sand. And that's why one of the things I think it applies to me. It applies to when I have people saying, you know, why don't you support our friend so and so? And I have to say, because their voting record stinks. What can I say? Their voting record stinks. And you know what? Here's the deal. We got to stop voting for people just because we like them. Because that is what holds people accountable. Let me tell you that it is still true that when politicians feel the heat, they see the light. And you know what? That's why it is imperative that you and I get engaged. But the other thing is we need to be able to articulate the arguments in a compassionate way that basically says, you know what? We've had the greatest country in the world. And here are the principles it was founded on. If we really want to be free, if we want to really return to a nation of prosperity, prosperity only comes when you stick with certain fundamental principles that have been proven to be true over years and years of time. And one of the things I encourage you to do is don't just read what someone else says about our founding fathers. Go back and read what they said. Because, let me tell you, in fact, one of the frightening things I see is when Jay Leno's doing jaywalking, or when
Oh, yeah.
Waters World, he's out there and they're asking, okay, we're celebrating Independence Day. Who did we get our independence from? They say, Greece.
Canada.
I don't know, shucks, and they ask, basic fundamental principles that, in fact, I've told people, I said, when I went through K through 12, I graduated in that portion of the class that made the other 50% look good. But you know what? I knew all that stuff when I graduated from high school. So I don't know, either despite the fact that I didn't do very well, I still learned enough to know that, or either the education system in America has gotten so it stinks. In fact, let me tell you, read the 45 goals of the Communist Party. Read the 45 goals, and now remember this came out in 1958, it was put in the congressional record in 1963. So this isn't something that Bill Zedler just, pulled out. It is something that has been around. But you know what's frightening?
Most of it's come true.
Yeah. And the other thing is, look at the number of things that the Supreme Court has done by judicial fiat. So let me ask you this: any questions?
What's the status of, you mentioned photo ID. With the Supreme Court ruling last week, what is the status in Texas of?
Well, a lot of times it's depending on the way, like Arizona wrote theirs and stuff like that. So far, ours I think is in effect now, because they didn't come out and say this nullifies the one in Texas.
Oh, good.
So
we're not affected.
you're right.
Okay.
Why are they so afraid of voter ID?
Listen, study California, and you will see why that they've allowed. Let me tell you, that they've had this attitude that, well, just let them come here and stay, let them get registered to vote. Gee whiz, well, we can't deny them the right to vote, and all this other stuff. And what it boils down to is this. Why do you think the Democrats want that? Of course. Because they're going to be voting for all the government programs.
Tell
We
them to look.
passed a state law that says if you vote illegally as an illegal alien, that you will be immediately deported by state rules and scare the hell out of these people from going to the polls.
Make it a felony.
We can't do that unless the Supreme Court shot that down. We can't do it.
No, that's the state law about who, you can call it a crime within the state.
Right.
And you can assign.
Here's the thing. I think what we'd have to do is say this. That you didn't vote in a federal election, you voted in a statewide or something like that. We might be able to do something like that said, if you voted in a state election and you voted fraudulently, then, I'll tell you this, we have been ratcheting up the deal as far as voter fraud is concerned. Of course, the Democrats will tell you, well, there's no problem with voter fraud. Well, how about all these dead people voting? I mean, how'd that happen? So.
Article 1, Section 8 gives Congress naturalization.
Right.
And citizenship, which by extension include immigration.
Right.
Immigration control is a federal issue, and there's not a damn thing we can do about it.
Yeah. And I will tell you this. I'm quite frankly, I'm tired of waiting for a comprehensive plan. I want the border secured, and I want the current immigration laws upheld. Don't give me all the nonsense. Just I want border secured, because you know what? There's a lot of elected officials that have this woman's blood on their hands, and all these other people that have died. And what it boils down to is need to stop it.
Yes, Bill. How many of you remember when California had that measles outbreak just a few months ago?
Yes.
catch them again. 3-day measles, they can't, but I think everybody's forgotten that there are 2 kinds of measles. And the vaccine that they have covers German measles, not 3-day measles.
But not rubella.
Well, not only that, a lot of the people who came down sick with measles, they were all up to date with their vaccinations. So this idea that, well, we just got to get everybody vaccinated, that doesn't mean you can't catch the disease. The other thing is this. One of the things that they tried to pass through this last time was a bill that said, right now, that you can get the demographics on a school district level, okay, of what percentage of people are vaccinated and what percentage of people are not. And they said they wanted to get it down onto the school district, to the individual campus. I fought it. And the reason why is, first of all, it's false information, it's bad information, because it leads people to believe that if you have a high vaccination rate, that your child who might be immune suppressed would do better in that school.
Safer.
Yeah, it would be safer. No, friends. Do you know why? In fact, I even pulled out a deal from MD Anderson that said, if you've had your child recently vaccinated with a live vaccine, which most of them are, don't bring them to MD Anderson. Do you know why? Because a child who's been recently vaccinated is basically throwing off these bacteria, which would be more likely to impact someone who's immune suppressed. And so what it boils down to, it's a bunch of phony baloney. And then there was basically a position paper that had come out and said, this is what they said, you know what, we need to have that message get out to encourage people to get their vaccines. So even though maybe the state can't force them, they will be peer pressured into doing it. And they've already had instances out in California where the parent doesn't look for another school to go to. They start looking for the kids that aren't vaccinated. And so, it's all based on a bunch of phony baloney nonsense that does nothing more than we're going to increase the vaccination rate, and guess what? Somebody's going to make a lot of money getting those percentages up. But that doesn't mean society will be any safer.
Yeah, I heard today or read about that they're advising this end-of-life counseling.
Oh, yeah.
They're giving bonuses for that.
Mhm.
Is that like the death panels or?
Sort of, yeah. Kind of.
Sure.
What, can you elaborate a little on that? Or?
Well, I think, in fact, let me give you one other real quick deal. Because we fought it tooth and nail last session. Because Texas is the only state, or one of the few states, where a doctor or a hospital can put a do not resuscitate in your records without your knowledge or permission. How many people know that?
I know this.
Let me tell you, if you go to the hospital, you tell them, you write on it, you shall not put a do not resuscitate order in my records. Sign it. Because here's the deal. They were going to change the law. They were going to improve the law. Why, you know what? They were going to make it where they had to make a good faith effort to notify you that they had done it. In other words, they could do it, and then they would make a good faith effort to notify you or your custodians or your guardians or whoever. They'd make a good faith effort to notify you that they had done it. Now I can tell you what that good faith effort would be. Right after you've gotten your sedation shot at about 10 o'clock, they come in and say,
Yeah.
sure.
Right.
Because you know what? You didn't have to sign anything. They weren't going to make you sign anything to get that done. My friends, how many times do you think they would, oh yeah, we told him. So, yeah, Charlie.
This is more a statement than a question.
Yeah.
And it actually pertains to what's going on at a bigger level. You mentioned education and the importance of that. Right now, before the State Board of Education is the Health Chiefs. And there's a group called TFN, which stands for Texas Freedom Network.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with freedom.
Boy, that's true.
They are so liberal, it's not even funny. You go to their webpage, they give you these real generic stance, but you dig deeper and you see all the liberal roots in it. Here's the key. What they want is sexual orientation beginning in second grade of pedophilia and marriage between anybody. They want the book, Sally Has Two Mothers, which I'm thinking not possible to do, but that's a whole different topic. And right now, no matter what is told to you, the board consists of 15 members. Of the 15, 9 have R by their name, but don't confuse R by their name with Republicans. And I don't want to use the term rhino, because if I did, I would insult rhinos.
That's right.
How about renegade? Would that work?
Well, it's worse than that. And representatives in this area are going to vote for that. Okay?
You better get on the phone.
And here's why. Pat Hardy, who I've known when I was on the board myself,
God.
okay, is aligned with Thomas Ratliff. And Thomas Ratliff serves on the board, even though he's been told he should not be. And here's how you trace it, ready? Look at Pat's financial records. We don't have to account for them. In her financial records, she was funded by Thomas Ratliff and by HEB. That by itself tells you where she votes. In my time on the state board, never once did Pat and I even share a soda because we had nothing in common. And on the board, you count on 5 votes. That's it, 5. And here's the issue. It's no longer education, it's indoctrination. If children in second grade know the term sex, in my view, it should be gender, male or female.
That's right.
Let them be babies.
That's right.
And right now, they're in such a rush to teach them things that they shouldn't even know about. And we're more concerned about the new norm, whatever that means. I was expressly asked by Kathy Miller, president of TFN, who, by the way, is the daughter of Ann Richards. And, let's be very clear, Kathy Miller makes Ann Richards seem like Ronald Reagan. Okay? That gives you an idea of where Kathy is. And Kathy goes to me, well, Mr. Garza, what do you think of sex ed? And I said, define that for me. And then she went further, and I said, no, not going to happen. Number 2, she says, well, what about the condom and the banana?
Oh,
and
no.
I said, number 1, I said, I don't think an ape can afford a condom. I said, number 2, I would argue that a banana, by having the peel, has a condom. And number 3, I've never heard of an instance where a banana can make someone pregnant. I said, which one of these 3 is inaccurate? And she goes, you're impossible. And she went around to the board members to get their votes, because that's going to be a major fight. You need to get on the phone, email them, write them, and say, you know what? Civility, forget this other stuff, civility. Because civility is more important than status quo nonsense that's going on right now. And if we're not careful, grandchildren, children are going to be indoctrinated to the extent that we can't get the genie out of the bottle. I would argue right now, the genie out of the bottle with Supreme Court. Supreme Court is something that's so horrible right now, and it's only going to get worse. And to say Texas is going to lead the way, that can't be done, not in our watch. So please, 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 do your research. Please research the Texas Freedom Network, TFN, and Kathy Miller. Kathy Miller, by the way, is the sister of the head of Planned Parenthood.
Oh my God.
Okay, which again is Ann Richards' daughter. So you can see how the web clearly springs out, and you can see where it all leads back to.
Oh,
And Planned
small
Parenthood, by any
world.
stretch of imagination, is not our friend. At all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thanks.
I have 2 things to say, but I want to tell Ms. Coleman. I'm willing to work with you on this to get this out. Because we can get it out statewide.
Everybody needs, we need to call her up on the phone. Okay. Hey, listen, thank y'all very much. I'll be here, and you got any questions or whatever, let me know. God bless you. Continue to fight. Thank you, Dan, Mr. Owenby.